When I go shopping in the supermarket, that's where I like to find women in the real
Mm.
world. But I find women don't want to be approached, and I've approached women in the supermarket, and they've kind of we played that dance. So let's say we're in the produce section, so I come running over, so I go that way, and then she goes that way. So I'm like chasing her around the
Right.
produce section, and I finally go. Obviously, she doesn't want me to approach her, so I give up, and
Right.
I find this game each week. It's
Right.
like whack-a-mole. It's like
Yeah.
which one pops up, who I go after her, but if I miss her, I go after the next one. Greetings and welcome back to another episode of Digital Dating with Anonymous Andrew, and I have a treat for you tonight. Tonight we have an author. Her name is Catherine Barra, and she also goes by Cassie, so welcome, Cassie.
Hi. Nice to
And
see you.
would you like me to tell you the two books? Because I did research the two books. You have two books, right?
I have 2 books. I'm working on a third. Yes.
Okay. She wrote a book called The Stories. You know what? Maybe you should tell them. The
Oh,
stories. Yeah,
these
these
stories
stories.
are
Go ahead.
true. Yeah, these stories are true. I shit you not. A humorous look at online dating for the unsuspecting older human. And I really had to decide if I was going to use that title, but I decided yes to use that title.
Partially, my handwriting was bad, but when I did write it before, I was laughing at it, and I said, I got to hear the stories behind this book. The second book you wrote is a poem book or lyrics?
Yes. Well, that was my first book. So I have been a writer my whole career in different jobs, and when my son went off to college and all that stuff, I was a single mom for a long time. So I just decided to start writing, doing my creative writing journey. So I was at my late 40s but the poems in that book are probably for everywhere from 6th grade all the way through. I had a person that I would love dearly, and he passed away. So there's a lot of poems in there for him, and it's just like a whole life journey.
Okay, a
So
collection
yeah,
of your nostalgia. Okay,
yes.
very cute. What are you working on the third book?
The third book is I'm trying to use humor in it, but with the impetus for it was when my father was dying in 2018. It is a humor book, but it's basically about the crazy, crazy stuff we go through before, during, and after death. And the impetus for that was a incident in the hospital. We were about ready to put my dad in to hospice, and I walked down the hall one day, and my brother and I were taking shifts watching my dad, and looked in this room, and this lady was playing the harp, and I was like, "What in the heck is she doing in the hospital playing a harp?" And I thought, "What the hell?" So she looked over at me, she said, "Oh, I'm a volunteer. I can come into your room if you want me to play the harp for you," right? So I went back to my dad's room. Now, he's this old Italian guy, right? Funny old Italian guy. He's dying, literally, and, I pulled on his toe, at the end of the bed, and I said, "Dad, there's a lady down the hall playing the harp, and she said she'll come play for you if you want." And he opens his eyes, and he looks at me, and he says, "Honey, I'm gonna be hearing the goddamn harpist soon enough. I don't wanna
Yeah.
hear that," So, anyway, it was so funny, but it was like, "Oh my god, that's horrible," but anyway, so that was the start of that book.
The first thing when you said harp, I said, I don't know if he was in a hospice or not, but I'm like, what a horrible musical instrument to play
Well,
in,
yeah,
because
it was
he's
a
right.
hospital. He wasn't yet in hospice. This was just before we
Okay, but
moved him.
still,
So I know,
he
I
was
know.
at the end stage of his life, and the harp is synonymous with heaven, right? Like they play the heart in heaven. Bling, bling, bling,
Yes,
bling, bling.
exactly.
I don't
Oh,
want to hear
anyway.
that, but
So
I don't
anyway,
know.
it's just my third book I'm working on. I should be finished with it by the end of December, and then I'll send it on to editing.
Okay.
But yeah, so that'll be out next year. But yeah, trying to weave humor into that, and it's been tricky, but it's also the stories I've written in there are pretty crazy too.
Not
So.
to divert too much, but I'm interested because I'm there. I'm 65, and
Hmm.
while that's a young age these days, and
Right.
I go to doctors and I do take every precaution and take my medicines and all that, and I exercise, blah blah blah. But you could, even though at 65 I was told I'm in perfect health, but that doesn't mean I can't have an aneurysm at 68 or a
Right.
stroke. And my parents died. My mom and grandpa died of a stroke at 70. I'm scared to death because when we're 30, 20, 30, 40, we feel immortal,
Right.
right? you don't think of death. You're
Right?
still in the prime of your life. You're running around having fun. You're having sex. You're going to
Yeah.
parties. You're drinking. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, so I lived it up.
Right.
And but now here I am in the end stages. That let's just say the golden years, just to
You're in
make
your
it sound
3rd
nice.
trimester. That's what they call
Trimester,
the
thank you.
3rd trimester is what they call it.
But Kathy, I'm shitting bricks. Like it's like it. I don't know what if tomorrow, and I hate that term. Like tomorrow, if I wake up, put my legs like on the floor, and I have no reason to think that I don't have another good 15, 20 years to go. But
You do. I mean, I think I'm 62, so I mean, I get it. I get what you're
okay,
that's why I'm writing the book, because I think we really start to think about it, and you're like I think one of the other things that happened, my mom was she got sick after my dad, and then she was in the hospital, and I was in there, and I've had some car accidents, not my fault, but my back was really hurting that day, and I said, "Oh god, my back's hurting," and she said, "Oh, well, just wait 25 years until you're my age," and then I was like, 25 years until I'm 80. Oh my God, I better get my act together, because it just goes so fast. And so, yes, but I understand that's exactly why I'm writing it, because you start thinking about it. You really start thinking about it.
I've
And
had 2 hips replaced. I've had heart surgery for AFib, and I've had my right foot constructed. I'm also very active in tennis and pickleball. So
well,
I do
that'll kill
push
you.
myself.
Just,
Whoever
every
said
person
that
I know has been injured on playing
yeah,
pickleball.
whoever said go out and do that, it's great exercise at your age. It's one of the hardest sports on the body.
Yes, it is.
So I may end up just learning how to the walls.
Gosh. Well, I have 2 horses and I just trained a wild Mustang, so how the heck we get into these things, I don't know, but that's the other thing, I mean,
Yeah.
I think as we get older, we
But I'd
gotta
be
do that
interested
stuff.
in reading your book. So
Yes.
or when the book comes out,
Yes.
maybe I have another podcast that that might be a perfect
Okay.
you might be a perfect guest for. So
Great, great. We
I
will
would
stay in
and
touch.
I'd like to read that before you come on and then we could talk about it. So,
Okay, okay,
all right, let's go to book number 2,
okay, the dating book.
the
The
dating book.
crazy dating book,
This
yes.
is a dating podcast. So let's talk about dating. I imagine this book is filled with dating stories.
Well, basically what happened was I was a single mom for a long time, and then when my son went off to college, I decided, "Oh, okay, I think I'm gonna try it," right? So my friends helped me do the profile and to write all that up, and I got on Match, and I was so excited because I met a couple of people that had been married, using Match, and so I thought I was very optimistic, and then, I remember the first guy that commented on my profile. I had a picture of myself on a cruise and I had a sundress on and he said, "Nice jugs." And I was like, "Oh my God." So I thought, what's going on? So anyway, that's the start of it, right? But then over the course of time, it just started being all these really, really weird dates. And I'm thinking, my God, is it me? Now, granted, I was in Washington, D.C., working for some philanthropists who are very wealthy, and the events I had to go to were, in D.C., dress up, black tie, all this kind of stuff. And so I was looking for a particular kind of guy that would enjoy going to do that stuff too. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I have my profile wrong or whatever. But then over the course of several years, it just kept happening. And I thought, oh, and not every date was bad, but then at my office, the lady that had the office next to me, she'd hear my stories and she said, "Kathy, you've got to write a book." And I said, "I am mortified that these things happened. I cannot even imagine, writing about this." And so she kept telling me to do that. And I never did it. And then during COVID, when we were all locked down, now granted, I have horses, so I was out riding my horse in the countryside and I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't get locked down anywhere. But she sent me lists of the dates that I had had that I forgot about because I had told her, these dates. And so I thought, "Oh God, I forgot about that guy." So I started putting the book together and I ended up publishing it in, 2022, I think it was. And, it's just been so much fun. I've done lots of podcasts, lots of radio shows. I actually 2 weeks after I published it, she recommended I get on Book Talk on TikTok. And the only thing I knew about TikTok was during COVID, the people doing the crazy dances. My friend would
Right.
have me record her with her horse and all that. And, I looked into it and I thought, I was on television. I mean, I worked in television years and years ago, so I wasn't afraid of making videos or anything. So I got on there and I just started doing it. And some of my TikTok videos about the chapters in my book, especially the one on the scammers, I have over 1 million views. And I actually just reposted that same video and it has 102,000. So it's like people can relate to
When
this
you say
stuff.
scammers, romance scammers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I caught it really quickly. But so I wrote a chapter about it, and then I did a video about it on TikTok, like 7-second video, and it just took off because people are like, "Oh," and the sad thing about that is as you know, they use the same script,
Oh,
they
yeah.
target the same demographics and all that.
So let's talk. That's a perfect segue into. Let's talk about that dating scenario, the romance scammers,
Mhm.
because they are one of the most prevalent. Off camera, we talked a little bit about. I do a little scam baiting, and there are some. I've heard the stories of some of the scams out there that are just from funeral home scams all the way down to, like we talked about, the parents getting phone calls from their kids,
Yes.
like, daddy, I'm
Using
in
yeah,
an
the
accident,
AI cloned
using the
voice.
AI voice. But one of the, and they're all horrible. You can't rate one as bad as the other. But when to take a let's look just take a simple scenario, like, and I'm sure this is in one of your stories. A woman in her 70s, let's just say 70 something, two, three, four, five, six, who loses her husband. And I think statistically, women outlive men anyway in
Right.
marriages, mostly, right.
Yes.
So we know that. So 74-year-old Mary Jane outlives Uncle Joe, not Uncle Joe, husband Joe. Oh my God, Uncle Joe. I have an Uncle Joe. I actually have an Uncle Joe. And so he goes, so she buries him and goes to bridge club, and all her girlfriends surround her. And then one day, I guess she's reading her email, or she's, however, maybe
Right.
somebody talked her into the dating app, or somebody talked her into TikTok or Instagram. And the next thing she knows, she's getting a text message from, let's just pick, I mean, I don't want to say like the Prince of Nigeria, which are the most common ones, but just some guy on an oil rig or some guy in
Mhm.
Saudi Arabia. And she's lonely, and she's a prime target for this, because, and she might also have a lot of money, and they do
Right.
their research, because maybe Uncle Joe, maybe husband Joe left, he's got his K, and he
Right.
was planning on spending it for the next 15, 20 years. Anyway, do you have any stories like that? Those
Well,
type of
yeah, I mean, I don't it didn't happen to me, but I do have stories like that because what happened after I posted the TikTok was so what happened with me was the guy said, was when I was in DC. He said, I'm in the military in Northern Virginia and I'm at this military base. Well, a week later, then he says, I'm in Afghanistan and I just got finished with training and I'm going to take a nice hot bath. I'm like, Northern Virginia and DC is all military, government. I'm like, I don't know one person that went to Afghanistan and took a hot bath. So it was like,
yeah.
what the hell? Anyway, I kind of was feeling already that he was a scammer, but I figured out he was a scammer. What I also figured out was he used a military obituary site to copy the pictures of a soldier who had died, was killed in action, and put those
And
on
that's
Match.com.
stolen
I know,
valor.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. But what happened with the video was I had so many comments from people they use the same script. I'm on a boat in the middle of the ocean, in the military. My wife was killed in a tragic accident. My parents are taking care of my child. I need more iTunes cards to talk to you, continue talking to you. That's the biggest script. But then I also heard from and we laughed, all these people were commenting and were responding to each other. The weirdest ones were, "Oh my god, yeah, I lost $30,000. I lost $50,000." Because you're right, and what you're just pointed out was really, really important to understand is they prey on people at their most vulnerable times, and that's what's really creepy, and I have to tell you, Andrew, I did another podcast about a week ago, and this woman literally was Tinder swindlered. I mean, she was big time swindled by a guy who was dating 7 women at the same time. Not the lady on the Tinder swindle. This is another lady I did the podcast with. She almost bought a house in her name with her money, but this guy went and got married to one of the 7 women. I mean, it was a shit show, let's just put it that way. Anyway, she used to be in technology. She's, like, in her late 30s, so I think she has moved into a different career, but she's trying to create an app that's a verification app because she told me she was in Inc. magazine too, but she told me this industry is a $33 trillion industry, fraud. It's like the 3rd largest world economy between the dating and the bank and all the fraud that they are now using to get people, like phishing, all that stuff on emails. And so it's just infuriating because you're right. They do target the older people, and maybe they're not as technologically savvy as well, right? They don't know. I mean, you and I might know more than some people in our generation. The 70s, 80s generation
It's
don't.
one generation ahead of us,
Right,
and they are one step behind.
right.
Well, like when my dad was alive many years ago, he didn't know how to operate a VCR. We're going way back.
Mhm,
And I was an IT guy early back in the day, and he would call me over because remember the flashing digital light on the VCR?
mhm.
Everybody got that when the power went out, and nobody knew how to reset the clock on the VCR. That's just an example. So that was one technology ahead of him, and he was a doctor. So he's a smart man,
Right,
but he couldn't figure out how to reset a clock on a VCR. So you could have somebody at our age, but maybe not. I'm sorry, you and I are 10 years older than us, but they just don't understand cell phone technology or how
right,
emails work, or even aware. Even though the government and AARP and so many different organization is doing a great job at getting the word out there that nobody will ask you for your passwords, nobody will ask you for your social security, yada yada yada. They're still falling for this.
right, right. And it's very sad because you're right. There is so much information out there about how to be careful. But like you said earlier, if they're cloning your grandma's voice from Facebook and they're calling you saying, "Grandma, I'm in jail. I need bail money,"
Well,
you know?
I heard one the other day that some woman got a call from what they were supposed to be the FTC,
Mhm.
and it said FTC on the caller ID, and he said that something's wrong with your social security number, and we're going to shut down all of your assets, and she panicked, and he said you have to follow these, and so she did up to a certain point when he had to drive her to the bank to withdraw money, and then the bank caught on. Now here's what they're doing: they're starting to educate the bank tellers and the
Right,
bank people.
right,
So that's good. But when the bank caught on, the guy said to her, okay, forget the bank. Go to your nearest Walmart. And that's when he went to the gift cards.
right,
And I have to be careful how I say this. But what government agency is going to take payment through gift cards, like an
right.
Apple gift card? All
Yep,
right. You
I
got to
agree.
use the brain that
But see, the older people, how would they know that? I mean, I think that's the other thing. Someone told me their
yeah, I know.
grandmother just ran around town trying to buy all the iTunes cards from Walgreens and here because
Yeah,
someone made her so
I
afraid
know. I know.
that but yeah, I mean, I have not had it happen to me personally, but I know people who have relatives or whatever that have, lost money to people. And my friend's husband's what was it, no, what would it be? Her father-in-law, he's in assisted living and they found out he was using his computer because he was kind of an independent living and he was sending money to a Russian woman who, was not a Russian woman. And so, yeah, they were looking at the estate planning and they're like, Where'd all this money go?" And that's where, so the men do fall for it too. So,
Well, I got very much involved with this for a couple of reasons, but one of them is that my youngest son's mother, so my what's the term? My baby mama
yeah,
can't catch up on those two. She got caught up in a scam. She got a pop up on the computer, and it said you got a virus. Call this 800 number, and sure enough, it was a fake Microsoft number. And they told her that her bank account had been compromised, and she knowing that her son, who's 25, a tech wizard, and that her ex husband was a IT man, did not bother to call either of us because she didn't want to bother us. Lost $80,000.
My gosh.
because they convinced her to take all the money out of her account and send it to China because China would keep it safe. And that would be my red flag. I sat her down and I said, what did you think when when you heard China?
Wow.
Why would you send 80 grand to China?" Anyway,
Well, and
you
that's just
must
it too. I'm sorry, the lady that I talked to last week said she's working with local California legislators about legislation because there is nothing to really punish these people, and that's what we also need. So
well,
anyway, yeah,
how can you?
I
You have
know,
to
I know.
catch them,
Yeah,
and then if you do, they're overseas. Now, I
right.
do know I did hear some stories in the scam baiting world that they are luring these guys over here,
Oh,
and then
jeez.
then then once they're on U.S. soil, they're gonna arrest them.
Okay.
That there's some great under and I don't wanna talk about it too much because
Right.
it's going
That's
on and
great.
it's
That's
working. So
yeah.
tell us
Good.
some there's gotta be some funny stories in your
Oh, they're
dating.
all funny. Yeah, well, that one's still funny because I caught him so quickly. But yeah, I mean, most of the stories are some are mine, some are other people's. I've changed all the names, but yeah, it's just like I said when we were talking earlier. It's just about the human condition. I mean, I have some mortifying stories in here. I have some kind of just crazy, a guy that wouldn't leave the date stories. I have stories from men.
These are your dates, not just other people's.
These are my dates, but then there are like one of the stories in here is from a man I dated, and names are changed, of course. But I dated him for a while, and nothing happened. It didn't go anywhere. But about 4 or 5 months later, maybe 6 months later, he popped up again on my matches on the app that I was on, and I thought, oh, and contacted him, and he said, oh yeah, let's get together for dinner. So at dinner, he's telling me where do he was a professor at a university in Denver, and he said, in the meantime, I didn't date for a couple months, and I got back on, and I was seeing this woman. She was a pharmacist. She is a pharmacist. She has 3 kids from 3 baby daddies. So I'm like, red flag. But then he said he thought they were really doing well and they were going along. They had gone to a couple conferences, and he said one day he knew she was off on Fridays. So he decided to go over and surprise her with a thing of flowers, and he goes to her house and knocks on the door, and she answers the door, and she's in a cheerleading outfit. And he said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, basically, I had asked him, like, why was she in a cheerleading outfit?" And he said, "Well, I found out she was in there having a threesome with 2 of her exes." And I said, "Oh my god, like, what the hell?" And I said, "Well, they didn't invite you in?" And he said, "No," but the whole point of that story is it happens to men and women, but it's so comical because you think that's the title of the book. These stories are true, I shit you not. You cannot make this stuff up,
Make
you
this
know?
stuff up.
You can't. So, yeah, but there's all sorts of funny stories in here, and, I mean, it runs the gamut.
Tell me about the guy who wouldn't leave the date. That sounds interesting.
Well, so I have I have 2 now. I just trained a little baby wild Mustang, I told you, but, I have an 18-year-old mare, girl horse, and so this guy I met online, he was a horse guy. So I thought, "Oh, well, we can have a casual date, and you can come to the barn where I keep my horses, where I board her, and we can, blah, blah." Well, he got there at about 10 o'clock, and the guy it was 6 hours later, I could not shake the guy. I mean, I had my friends trying to help me, like, and then I said, "Well, I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go grab some lunch." He goes, "Well, let's go have lunch." I said, "I really don't wanna have lunch." Then he followed me. I had a meeting in between that for my graduate program. I had to go interview someone at a Starbucks. He followed me to the Starbucks. It was just bizarre. And I mean, that's the guy that wouldn't leave. We've got the stories about the guys who, you think you're going along really well right before the first real date, and then they send you a dick pic. That I mean, it's like one of my chapters is called what is it called? The Johnson Gallery, because basically for a long time, it was almost like a Hallmark card, before you
Sure.
go on a date, right before you get this picture and you're like, I don't want that. Why would you send that? So it's just funny, but it's
I listened to a
crazy.
podcast a couple of days ago. It was a dating podcast. I'm not going to mention it, but and they had 1 or 2 episodes all about dick pics.
Yeah.
And they had some women. So it was a male and female co host. And then they had a panel of women they asked to come on, I guess virtual. And they polled the women and they said, have any man, of all the dick pics that they got, did any of them persuade you to go on a date with them? And 99 point, I think one said one of them had a cute penis or something, but all of the rest of them said,
Right.
"No, not at all." It
Right.
turned them right off.
Right.
So it's and so there's this like mass announcement to all the men out there, and I'm saying it to in my podcast. It's on Reddit. It's on other podcasts. It's on everywhere. Guys, don't send them. They don't want them. They
Right.
don't work. They're not going to come. Go. Oh my God, you got a beautiful dick. I'm coming right over. It doesn't work.
So true. Well, you just reminded one of the stories in my book is this guy I did, he's a chiropractor, right? So he's got a professional life. He's written a couple books. So one day we were texting and he was on his way to his grandson's house, son's house to help his grandson put his Thomas the Train bed together. That was the whole story. Well, on the way during the drive, he keeps texting me and he keeps sending me pictures. Like one of them is a calendar picture, like from your iPhone that says 8. And then the speedometer was 88. I'm like, "You're going too fast anyway," but everything was about 8s, and I'm like, "Am I missing a holiday?" Like, I don't really get it. I mean, I wasn't understanding it. So finally I said, "What's with all the 8s? I'm not really getting that." And he said, "Well, that's how big I am," And I thought, "Oh my God. So you're going over to your grandson's house to put the Thomas the Train bed together while you're texting me about the size of your winky?" So anyway, yeah, it's just like, oh my God. And it was just shocking because you're like, I really was not getting it. I thought honestly it was a holiday or something. And oh
Yeah.
my gosh, so funny.
I don't know if I've ever come out and talked about this honestly, because this is the first time I'm really talking about this. Maybe once or twice in a conversation, but I have never sent an unsolicited dick pic.
Right.
So I have had I have had sexting with women that we met online, and that there was sexting, and then there was video, and or she sent the first pic, and but I there's something just innate in me that my dad brought me up to be a gentleman, and I just don't think that's gentlemanlike. And I know that sounds like a
It's just
weird.
so odd. I mean, it's just so you have to think of the psychology behind it because if the woman's not asking for anything
Well,
of that sort,
one of
then
the
like,
people on that podcast equated it. He came up with a theory. He said
yeah,
that the male gene is still back in the Neanderthal days, and that the monkeys or the apes, that's how they mated, and they beat their chest, and they ran around with their genitals exposed, and
they
the
sent their
women
dick
could
pics.
see
I'm
them.
just kidding. Oh,
Yeah,
that's way
they were sending dick
back in
pics
the
through the
day.
trees, but
Back in the day.
apparently it's still part of the instinctual part of our Neanderthal caveman days,
Yeah,
and it seems natural for them to say, "Here I am." They beat their chest and go, "Here I am. I'm King Kong," or they're trying to get across. And here is what I can provide to you. Now, it could make sense in the younger generation because the younger women are looking for men to have childbirth years,
right.
and that. But I don't think the size of your dick is going to make babies. It's not what the sun.
Here's the other thing, Andrew, when you talk about dating nowadays too, think about, I always talk about my friend who is married. She's been married for what, 35 years. She met her husband. She's older than me. She's probably almost 70 through a personal ad, right? So she had to look at the newspaper, read the article, look at the PO box, go home and write a letter to the PO box, send it to the guy, wait for him to respond, make the date. I think what two things we have lost the art of anticipation, right? So that is gone. It's not even a thing. And then we've also lost just the common courtesy. I mean, you can be so autonomous online and this ghosting stuff. And it's just, I mean, I have not dated in years. And I find my cousin finally convinced me to go on Facebook dating. And I did, and I had a date. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm on a date." 5 hours of my life I spent with this guy on a great date. I thought it was a great date. So the next day it was pouring here and we didn't do anything. We were going to meet for coffee, but we decided to go Sunday. Then I texted him. I said, "I'm going to see my horse. I can meet you after that for coffee like we talked about." Didn't hear from him all day. It's 4:30. He said, "Oh, sorry, I just got really busy today." I have never heard from him since. I'm 62 years old. What the hell? You know? I mean, that to me, it's juvenile, but it's like this is the modern day, like
Yeah,
I said, human condition. And I wonder too if men, I think men have been really emasculated. And I think one of the things I say in my book is one of my friends said to me, we get yelled at if we do open the door for someone, or get yelled at if we don't open the door for someone.
there
So
is.
yeah,
There's a broken system in there
yeah,
somewhere where the men are not sure what to do. And I'm not going to blame the Me Too movement, but it started around there. And then
yeah,
COVID, I think COVID had a lot to do with it. I've told this story 100 times. I'll tell it to you briefly just for your context. But when I go shopping in the supermarket, that's where I like to find women in the real world. But I find women don't want to be approached, and I've approached women in the supermarket, and they've kind of we played that dance. So let's say we're in the produce section. Here's the grapefruits and the oranges, and I see her, so I come running over, but she all of a sudden makes that move around the other side. So I go that way, and then she goes that way. So I'm like chasing her around the
right,
produce section,
right,
and I finally go. Obviously, she doesn't want me to approach her, so I give up. And
right,
I find this game each week, and it does turn into a game because it's
right,
like whack-a-mole. It's like
yeah,
which one pops up, who I go after her, but if I miss her, I go after the next one. But then I'll go home, turn on a podcast, and the women, there's a specific podcast called Ask Women. It's a great, great, great podcast run by two women. I've had Marnie on here,
mm-hmm.
and they're complaining that men don't approach them enough.
Hmm.
So we're getting mixed
Well,
messages.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I
Well, let me
I
ask you.
haven't been, but again, our
You're in the
generation is,
supermarket tomorrow. You
yeah.
you need to
Uh,
pick up some carrots or something.
I'll let you know. I'll report back. I have not ever had that happen, but
Okay.
who knows? I mean, and again, I think just being in our generation, it's just so different because, as I say also in my book, I've dated men who have 35-year-old kids, and then they have 2-year-olds from a rebound marriage.
Yeah.
They've been
Oh,
married
yeah.
once,
That's
twice, 3
tough.
times. I mean, it's just tricky at this stage. So, but yeah, the book, I try to be comical about things because if you don't have levity in everything you look at, I just think it's not, you have to look at it. I'm still optimistic, about things, but I'm busy. I have a busy, full life,
Yeah.
and I'm financially fine, and I think that's the other thing is, what's the purpose of the companionship? And I think that is
If you're not looking for someone to come take care of you, it's for me, and I could say somewhat the same, that I'm a little bit financially stable, that I could support myself or whatever. I'm okay.
mhm,
It's that cold winter night when we want to cuddle up with a cup
yeah,
of hot apple cider, or go pumpkin picking in the fall, or go take that brisk walk on a I'm up in New York City, and when it snows up, actually on Long Island. When it snows, we get some of the most beautiful sceneries out here.
right,
And just to throw on a jacket and some boots and just take that walk with somebody you love. I'm also down by the beach.
mhm,
I'm right on the south shore of Long Island. It's walking with somebody hand in hand along the
right,
beach, which
right,
it's not about the money. It's about just someone to laugh with, to cry with, to tell
right.
stories with.
Right.
And
And I think
also,
as women get older, I think too, as you mentioned earlier, men pass, a lot sooner than women most of the time. So I think we find also in our groups of women friends, I haven't been married in a long time, but that we just depend on that network also for our support, but I agree with you. I think it's
the widower,
not just the widowers, but the divorcees and,
the
the
divorcees,
people,
okay.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's but again, these stories are true. I shit you not. But I think it's, like I said, I wasn't going to write it, but my friend convinced me. And I just had a really great time with the book. Just meeting people, talking to people about it. And I think the other thing I want to say is that we are all in the same boat. Like everyone really, if they go on a bad date or several and they have bad luck with this stuff, you're not alone. I mean, I thought I was the only one that was dealing with this kind of weird
Mm.
stuff, but it's like, oh my God, I wrote this and then people have told me their stories. I'm like, oh my God, that's like 10 times worse than what happened to me. Now, I've never been swindled or anything like that, but it's just the behavior that's kind of fascinating to me. Like, what are we doing as grown adults? Like getting ghosted by a 60-year-old man. Like, what the hell? I mean, I'm not in 7th grade, so it's just very fascinating to me, and I don't look at it negatively. I think, "Okay, well," but I did date another guy, a chiropractor who we talked for about a week maybe, and then we were gonna meet, and then I told him about the books I've written, and he said, "Oh, I don't think I really wanna see you because I don't wanna be the next chapter in your next comedy book." I said, "Well, then don't be an ass." No, I'm just kidding, but, no.
Very funny because
Yeah,
I had the same thing with the podcast.
yeah,
I would go out and they'd ask me what I do, and I'm an honest guy. So I'm in the IT world during the daytime, but my podcast was taking off the last couple of years. So many of the dates I said, I'm a podcaster. And
right,
they would say, well, what's your podcast about? And this is the first one, the dating one. The cult one and the other one came later. And I said, oh, it's a dating podcast. Immediately I got the same reaction you did. I don't want to be on your next podcast.
yeah,
And one of them, I did make a mistake. I went home that night because we had a great date. It was just chemistry, and she was like, both of us said we got to see each other again. And I ran home that night and I recorded an episode. I said I had a great time tonight with a date, and she found me on Instagram because I had not given her my podcast name, and she texted me 2 days later and said, I heard your podcast and I didn't give you permission to talk about our date. So
oh my gosh.
we're not gonna we're cut. I'm ceasing connection with you right now.
Wow.
And I didn't say anything bad. I said,
Right,
what a great time I had tonight and I didn't mention her name. I didn't mention the town we were in.
that's
If you look at
crazy.
the bottom of the screen, what's my name? Anonymous Andrew.
Right,
And I set it up that way so because of the story of the girlfriend that broke my heart 3 years ago. And I've been anonymous ever since, only meaning like I try to keep very, very, very vague where I live.
right,
But this woman was very upset because all I did was say that I had a great time with her. And
that's
I don't
crazy.
I don't know why yeah, it's crazy because
Well, you can't do anything about it. It's just,
no, but
and I don't, like I said, I've changed all the names in my stories.
here's something funny. 1 year later, just a couple weeks ago, she pops up on my another dating app
Oh
and
my god.
likes me. She swiped right on me. And I wrote her because I recognized her right away. And I wrote her, and let's just call her Susan. I said, Susan, this is Andrew. We went on a date last year. You didn't like the fact that I spoke to you, but I said, the fact that you're swiping right on me, I'm guessing maybe you want to give it a second chance. And I apologize. I said, I was wrong for blah, 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 blah. I never heard from her. So
Well, that just reminds me, the guy that wouldn't leave, the date that wouldn't leave, 6 hours, granted. About 6 months later, he sends me a note on one of the apps, like, because he was on, I think it was Match. I can't even remember, but, "Hey, you look like we have a lot in common, blah, blah." I said, and I wrote back, I said, "You are kidding, right? You do remember me, correct? That we had 6-hour date that you really were annoying and you wouldn't leave?" And then he wrote me back and he said, "Oh, I didn't have my glasses on, you bitch." I was like,
really,
"Oh, yeah." And I was like, "Wow, honey." I
H-
mean, so
how
yeah,
did
it's
you get
crazy.
him to leave the first
How
time?
did I get him to leave?
So if you can't remember, that's fine. But I'd be curious how you finally
No,
got
I
rid
think
of
I
him.
did. What happened was that we ended up I was starving because it was, like, all these hours into this damn date, and, we went had lunch, and then we were leaving, and I said, "I really gotta go, I really gotta go, I've gotta go," I just made it, but he was kinda creepy because he followed me and,
Mm.
even my friends tried to get rid of him, but, yeah, as soon as I got in my car, I was, like, looking behind me thinking, "I hope he's not following me home," but, yeah, it was pretty crazy.
I think when you set out to do a date, there's and we don't have time to talk about it now. But I would like maybe you'll come back when you do your third
Sure.
book and we can talk about it. But you got to lay down some boundaries before they
Yes.
go out on the date. You got to say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to meet you here, but I got to be home by 8 o'clock. And then ladies always let the guy know that her friends know that you're with so and so, and yada yada yada. We're gonna wrap it up soon. Tell us some maybe your advice and tips for the ladies and or guys
In
out
the
there
dating?
today that
Yeah.
yeah.
I just think you have to have, sense of humor about it, but I also think you just have to understand that even if you're an older person, you still have to have some common courtesy. and some levity. I know that we've all been through a lot of stuff at this, by now. And one of the things I say at the end of my book is, I just need to find someone who's willing to walk alongside me while I'm, dragging my wagon full of luggage and baggage, and while they're dragging theirs, and so we can go unpack together, right? I mean, because we've all been through so much by this time, and you can judge, but you also, everyone's been through stuff. So I think you just have to go in really knowing what you are looking for. And I also think it has to enhance your life. If
I
it doesn't
agree.
enhance your life, the other person, the companionship, then, and a lot of people, they want to do it because they don't like to be alone. I know a lot of people like that. In fact, one of the stories in my book, I knew a lady who was married 32 years and was having an affair for 15 with a doctor she worked for because she didn't want to lose her beach house. So she didn't want to divorce her husband. So yeah, that it's crazy. So my advice would just be have a sense of humor, be optimistic and just keep trying. That's all we can do.
Kathy, where can we find your current book or both of your books right
Yeah,
now? And where can we find
sure.
you on social media and
Sure.
website and all
Um,
that?
well, my website's katherinebarra.com, where you can go to buy both my books. There's a link, you just click on the book and it goes, but they're on Amazon. And then my TikTok is Catherine R. Author. That's Catherine with a C. And those are the two places I usually do my most of my involvement and engagement. But yeah, the book is funny. These stories are true. I shit you not. And my poetry book's called Lucid Life. Yeah, I mean, and again, I started writing these, in my 50s, and so it's never too late to try something new. So
When do you think the third book will be out?
I'll be finished writing it at the end of December. It'll go to editing probably middle of next year, maybe
Okay.
early spring, hopefully.
I'd love to have you back. We'll talk
Okay,
about
great.
that book and
Sure.
anything else we maybe didn't get to talk about today.
Okay, sounds good.
What a delightful conversation. Thank you for stopping by.
Well, of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, everybody. Cassie Bear, thank you.